Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Do Nothing Project. Just getting this figured out. This is the Wednesday, June 2nd edition. Is it June 2nd? June 3rd? So this is going to be a bunch of something today. I'd written a piece about called the dynamic care. About dynamic care, and it's sort of about looking at the different forms and styles of practice, the different kind of categories of practice as I see them. Well, first of all, welcome everybody. I'll tell you a little bit what we're going to do. I'm saying this now because I want to kind of talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. Glad to see everybody. I can kind of see the comments coming in. I can see the blue font, so I know Andrew's here. Hey, Andrew. This idea of the dynamic care grid is that there are lots of ways to care for ourselves in the world, and there are ways that are more active, and there are ways that are more ostensibly passive, or maybe more active versus more restful. And the Do Nothing Project has been kind of situated itself as along that kind of restful end, although it's also building the muscle of equanimity, the capacity to be with experience, and we approach different sort of meditative subjects over the course of this broadcast, and different approaches and ways of thinking about meditation. But today I really wanted to focus on more active practices, just given everything that's happening in the world today, and talk a little bit about that and about how I see how practice can support ourselves and what's happening in the world, and support and be an act of solidarity for all the Black lives that are being affected by everything happening in the States right now, all around the world, not just in the States. Canada has its own systemic racism issues and problems. So I think of this, we're going to do a Tonglen practice today, which is a very active compassion practice. And it's really about cultivating presence, first of all, in order to not turn away, to bear witness to the things that are happening, to bear witness to what's happening in ourselves. And then there's an active component of of deliberately breathing in the suffering that's happening around us, and creating an intention to transform that. So I'll talk us through what that's going to look like. And I guess when I think about this larger picture of practice, I think, practice is a way of kind of resetting us into the present moment, to help us find resources to be more available to what's going on, to help us actively build compassion. And those are practices that we do on the cushion. But this is now time, I think, for practices that are off the cushion as well. In other words, practices that express our active support for what's happening, for the protesters, for the lives being affected right now. And that means, so we're going to list in the show notes and list some different resources for different organizations if you're interested in supporting them. That's what Sarah and I do around a national bailout fund, there's a whole bunch of different ones there. There's resources for organizations that are around reforming police violence and coming up with research-based solutions around that. And then there's also the practice that we do about our own kind of insight process, especially as white people, looking into being curious about all the ways in which we may be unconsciously perpetuating these various kinds of biases. And for that, it's really, I think that's about education. That's about reading. I mean, I could recommend, there's some great books. This book's terrific so you want to talk about race. Really good book for kind of helping us notice some of the subtle ways in which these biases live inside ourselves. And if you think that being Canadian, because I know there's a lot of Canadians on here because I'm in Canada, kind of somehow protects you from all of this. There's this great book by Desmond, The Skin We're In, which is all about systemic racism towards Black populations in Canada, and how that's been ongoing, and the struggle, and his particular struggle around that, and what he's seen as a journalist. So there's a lot of, if people want to share resources along the side, I also highly recommend, unfortunately I'm not at home, so our main home where all my books are, but I've talked before about Angel Kyodo Williams and Lama Rod, their book, Radical Dharma. Lama Rod has a brand new book out called Love and Rage, which I think is coming out in the next week or so. It's like January 16th is the release date, 2 weeks. That touches on a lot of these issues. So there's just, this is the part of practice that's about learning about our world, learning about ourselves, learning about our responses, and not putting it on black friends to kind of help us explain it to us and for us, but to do the work ourselves to kind of look into that. So those are some resources. So I'm hoping that there can be a conversation around this on the comments too, or if people want to share resources and ideas, please do. We're going to move into the practice now. So Tonglen practice is, if people are interested, there's a good description of it in Pema Chodron's When Things Fall Apart. This is like the first Dharma book I think I ever read. I read it probably 30 years ago in the 90s. It's a really great book, and she's got a really breaks down Tonglen practice in a really nice way. Kind of interesting. I always wonder if she got her title from, there's a famous African book, Nigerian book, kind of African literature book called Things Fall Apart. I always wonder if there's some connection there, but anyway, she really breaks down Tonglen in a pretty straightforward way. And so I'll give you guys the steps that we're going to do. We'll start with just getting very settled and kind of feeling resourced in our own experience, finding some presence, some solidity, and then we'll move into kind of working a little bit with texture, where you the idea is to kind of breathe in sort of heat and heaviness and connect to those elements, and breathing out light and spaciousness. So we kind of prime ourselves with that piece. And then we move into the actual main stream of the practice, which starts with breathing in the suffering of someone you know personally, someone who's been affected by what's going on, or in your local community, and you kind of picture this person, and the idea is that you're breathing in their suffering and their challenge and staying present with it, and that there's a kind of, the heart is a sort of purifier, that it kind of filters that out, and then you're breathing out your desire to give them relief, care, peace, whatever that looks like for you. So it's this part here where it starts with, and we start with the personal, and then we move into the larger story of what's happening with the protests more generally. And just something to say here, this is an intense practice. So, and it's very natural that there comes a time in the practice where we feel like we're not sure if we have enough resources to keep doing it. So I will have some pointers around that. But when that happens, there's a couple things we can do. One is we can start to then do Tonglen for ourselves, and for indeed anyone who feels overwhelmed, and all that stuff that can come up when you do it, like your own anger, your own shame, your own fear, your own sense of inadequacy, whatever can come up when you're doing it. You then immediately start to do Tonglen for yourself, and by extension, for everyone who's also having that challenge. Because this is really the practice of interconnection. It's the practice of knowing that everything human is, everything human is known to us, everything human is part of us, and we connect. So whatever response is happening, we connect to the desire to then address that suffering, and then connect it to the larger story of the world. And you do that, and then you can shift back into the bigger angle, wider angle lens, or if you need to, you can move into somewhere a little more resourcing, like just noticing the breath or opening your eyes, and we keep going like that. So, so that's a little bit of an overview. It's an intense practice, and these are intense times. This is a practice of radical wakefulness and fierce compassion for what's happening for all the people who are affected. So I'm really happy to be doing this with the community, and I'm happy that all you guys are here. So let's do this. Okay, so as always with this broadcast, the language is invitational. So if you have your own practice that you prefer to go to at any time, you're welcome to do that. Also welcome to tune me out, put me on mute. A lot of the power of this just comes from sitting in community and resetting and opening in community, knowing that there's the support here. And if you are interested in following along, I like to start with a few kind of deep breaths to get myself organized. On the inhale, that's kind of the stretching up, finding some extra alertness in the posture. The exhale is the downward motion, the settling. And when you breathe out here, the beginning part here is about getting settled, getting centered. So just notice as you're breathing out if there's any sort of tension in your face and shoulders, which is natural in the neck. And just seeing as you breathe out, you can kind of deliberately soften the forehead and the jaw and the shoulders. It's like you're breathing out any tension. And as you breathe out, think of that as kind of arriving as well. You breathe out, and as you let go of tension, it helps us land more firmly in our bodies, in our chairs, in the moment itself, in our spot here on the earth. So just taking a moment to feel that, let yourself land, feel the seat, the cushion or the chair underneath your seat, feel your feet on the ground or whatever's on the ground. Breathing up. As we breathe in, you're kind of breathing in sustenance from the earth, that kind of groundedness. Stretching up and then breathing out, relaxing through the front. And we'll connect here to the equanimity piece, which is so important for this practice, for every practice, but that's really around this being present, this open acceptance, allowing of everything that's here, even everything challenging. So that means all the sounds in the room, sounds of traffic going by, sounds of distant yells in your house, if that's the case. It means the full surround of your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts, that they're allowed to be there. Sometimes I think of this as it's a paradox. It's like you're getting very present and very in presence, but you're also almost becoming transparent. Just opening up to everything that's here and not trying to create a boundary to block something, to push something away or to secure something else, but just this act of opening. And this is where it all begins. It begins with being present to what's actually happening in our world, in our bodies, in our space, in our minds. So we can stay open here. It can also help to get, with our stability, to get a little bit absorbed here at the start with some sensation. Use it as an anchor or a home base, like the feeling of the breath or the feeling of the warmth in the hands, or maybe the sense of the whole posture sitting. Kind of let your concentration settle on that, and that can begin to bring a little bit of focus and rigor into our experience. But if you do this, let the attention be light. You're not straining. And just notice if you're bracing here, waiting for something. See if you can soften a little bit. This is really about kind of coming to ground here at the start. And we can even see if the breath may start to slow down kind of naturally. There can be a sort of bit of a sense of stillness and stability that might be present in your experience that you can kind of focus on. Okay, so we're going to begin to shift towards our Tonglen practice. And we keep things sort of more abstract or more elemental, maybe, where at first we're just sort of connecting to the texture part of this. So it's not so much about connecting it to specific people and events. So we're getting the system used to this idea of as we breathe in, we're breathing in sort of heaviness or heat. I'm imagining that. And as you breathe out, you're breathing out lightness, coolness, relief, spaciousness. So breathing in, it's like you're breathing in heaviness or darkness. It kind of comes into the heart, and the heart's the great purifier, the great filter here. And then we breathe out lightness and ease. And that's the motion, that's the movement. Let's try this for a couple minutes. And this is very much about using the imagination here. It kind of gets us in a headspace for the main practice. Good, and now we'll shift it to an actual specific person, someone in your life who's suffering, particularly if it's connected to these events. the forms of that suffering can take: anger, hurt, fear, revulsion, physical suffering, the outrage, oppression more generally, violence. But the idea is that we connected to someone, it may be someone you know personally, or someone in your community, or just one figure that's been in the news, that you identify with in some way, and it can be in any side of this, but just breathing in their discomfort or suffering. You breathe that in as something heavy, whatever it is, their sadness, their anger. And you breathe out relief. You breathe out as if you could send that person relief on the out breath, sending them tenderness, sending them peace, sending them love, sending them space, whatever feels right for you, with whatever your natural expression of that is. So breathing in the suffering, it's sort of this heavy, dark thing, and imagining you can purify that and then breathe back, sending out relief. And just as you're doing this, notice if your own stuff comes up, which is really natural. And if it does, you can immediately be doing this for yourself too, because the more you support yourself, the more you'll be able to support others. There's this direct relationship. This compassion needs to be across the board. So if you notice your own anger come up, your own fear or hurt or discomfort in any way with this practice, then you can immediately breathe in that challenge into your heart, your own challenge, and breathe out relief to yourself, knowing that it's not just for you you're doing this, it's for everyone who might feel contracted or whose own stuff is coming up. And then when it feels right, you switch back to the initial person you were working with. There's this act of solidarity in recognizing the commonalities of human suffering, and also recognizing this very important differences. So breathing in suffering and breathing out lightness, relief, love. Okay, good. And then we can begin to open it up now to the larger field, the whole situation, the whole country, the whole world, which is responding to this moment, all the ways in which these systemic injustices and oppressions are being felt. In particular, for Black people in the United States. Breathe in the suffering, and we breathe out, we breathe back relief, care, support, presence. This act of enormous caring and respect. Breathing in all that darkness, and then breathing out, desire to give relief, the relief itself, the love itself. And just know at any time if it does get to intense, the two options are to suddenly work with yourself and the response internally, breathing in your discomfort and that intensity. But also know that it's totally okay to titrate this, that it might be that you need to just back off the whole practice entirely. Maybe just switch to the breath, or notice your hands, or even open your eyes and reconnect to the world around you. It's totally okay to kind of titrate this practice. And if you feel resourced enough, you can go back in, or you just stay there. Breathing in the suffering, imagining that it's being purified somehow or being worked through, that you're able to transform it through the engine of your care, and then sending back relief, care, compassion. This whole thing is an act of compassion. Building up our own capacity to be with what's happening, to help, to support. And just notice the equanimity piece even here. If you're rigid, you're braced, you're tight, can you let this be this softer, natural thing, just breathing in and breathing out? The more still and centered and present we are, the more equanimous, the easier the practice is, the more natural the practice is, the smoother, the more effective, the fuller, the broader, the wider. And we continually refresh our intention into the concentration part. We start to drift or lose the plot. We reconnect to this desire to be present, to breathe in the suffering, to breathe out relief, offer this compassion. And then when you're ready, the last few minutes, we'll just let go of that practice. If you like, you can keep doing it, or just let go and reconnect to the body a bit. We'll just sort of coast here or rest the last few minutes. Sort of like you rang the bell, and not just sit inside the echo, the after effect. And we do this too as an act of self-compassion. Let ourselves rest here for a bit. And just let whatever is here be here. It might be a feeling of stillness or calm. It might be grief. It might be rawness. Just let it all be here. Knowing that we're sitting in community. We're supporting each other. Okay. So Tonglen is something that can be done on the fly. I mean, you can do it when you're walking down the street and you notice a homeless person in a bad way, just do an immediate Tonglen where in addition to whatever actual physical support you want to offer, there's just that offering of seeing what's happening, wanting to breathe in their suffering, breathe out compassion or relief. And it's just a way of, it's a training to force yourself to see what's happening in the world around us and develop more compassion. So more compassionate responses can emerge and more resilience. And that's an important practice. And I would say in this time, maybe it's not enough. Maybe we also want to consider getting involved locally in what's happening in local areas around where you live, whether that means just supporting organizations or actually, if you feel resourced enough, going to protests or definitely reading about the issues and getting more informed. And I love this book by Oluo. Like I said, you want to talk about race, it's really good. And there's just so many resources that are out there now. So yeah, so I can't see what's going on there looking at the comics. So there's comments there over on the side, and people can post resources too, and we're going to post some in the main notes for the broadcast too. It's important to be able to talk about these things. The do nothing is doing, going back to that dynamic care grid. It's so important to have these moments of just really genuinely doing nothing, of just sitting and resting and resetting. And that's what allows us to be able to give back and to be present for future challenges. And then there are more active practices that are about deliberately working with places of discomfort and trying to increase capacity. And then there are practices that are about deliberately being out in the world, that are about causes and about, I say that Cornell West line, like justice is what love looks like in public. That there's this that the job of being awake in the 21st century isn't just about seeing the universal, the oneness in things, and that universality that traditional Dharma has moved us toward, or these traditional contemplative practices, but it's also to see the very particulars of difference and the ways in which different injustices happen in the culture that have been previously unconscious. And it's sort of, I feel like our job as being awake in the 21st century is to kind of be looking in both those directions, looking at what the differences are and how and why the differences are important, and how we can then respond to those, and then also looking to what the commonalities are. Anyway, good to have this community. Good to have everybody here. I'm gonna wrap it up. We'll see you guys on Sunday. Depending on what's happening in the world, it might be more traditional, do nothing, or we might do something else. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hope that was a helpful practice. And if you're interested in reading more about it, this is, again, I'd recommend this resource, a great chapter on Tonglen by Pema Children. But there's lots written online too. Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Milan.